Right. Hey, everybody. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Kyle, and I'm a behavior analyst, and I hope you're enjoying tacos so far. In this presentation, I'm really excited to present because we are going to be talking about an area that is very near and dear to something that I am passionate about, and that is social skills and autism. How those two things intertwine, how ABA and your sessions and your treatment team can really work to develop those skills. And so just a little bit about me. I've been working in the field of autism for about 7 or 8 years now. I'm a behavior analyst. So I currently oversee a caseload of clients. And then I also helped in our agency develop a social skills curriculum, which we served clients right out of our clinic. So that was developing protocols, developing goals, developing social opportunities, ways that they can access and practice those skills. So I'm excited to go through and share with you a little bit about what we're looking at when we talk about social skills, things that you can do as parents and caregivers as crucial members of your child's team. So we're going to go ahead and get started here. All right. So just to kind of go over where we're going to go for this presentation on the PowerPoint here. So we'll start with an introduction to social skills in general. Why are we talking about social skills? What do we mean when we talk about social skills? We will talk about ABA and the role in determining, teaching, and reinforcing those skills. We will go over what generalization and maintenance means. So two very crucial things that we're talking about when we're looking at ABA and the role of social skills. And then finally, we'll talk about the roles of parents and caregivers and peers. So things that you can do to help facilitate your child's success. All right. So to begin here, the first thing I want to kind of discuss when we're talking about social skills, I want to kind of think about how we can look at that. And so when I think about the word social skills, the word that has come up for me over time is connectedness. So when we're talking about connectedness, what is this? Why is this something we care about? And in our field, as a behavior analyst, as I'm sure you might know, we like to define everything in terms. So when I was thinking about how can we define the word connectedness, I thought back to a book that I had read back in college. It's by Edward Hallowell. He is an adult psychiatrist. He's an author. He is an expert in the field of ADHD. And he has a book called Connect. And in that book, he talks about on a basic human level, right, we are wired for connection. That's part of our makeup. That's who we are. And he breaks down connection into 4 main parts, which I want to go over with you. So the first way he talks about connection is feeling close to another person or a group. Connection is feeling like you are part of something larger than yourself. Feeling welcomed, and finally feeling understood. Now, I think these are all terms probably where in our lives, maybe we've felt really good about these things before. We've said, yes, like I'm feeling connected, I'm feeling these things. And maybe there's also been times where we've struggled to find those connectedness. We've struggled to have these parts in our lives. We haven't been sure what that looks like. That's part of, I think, the human experience in general. But I don't have kids, nor do I have kids on the spectrum, but from the time I've been in this field and things that I've observed and things that parents have told me, these things seem to come up in those conversations where parents say, gosh, like, I feel like my kiddo doesn't connect with his peers. I feel like his peers aren't welcoming him, or I feel like she's not being understood, or, they don't feel like they're a part of the group. And so I think this can be hard for anybody, but then you add autism into the mix and it can make it even more challenging, right? So thinking about these ways of connection. Yes.
Kyle, sorry to interrupt. Could you go to presentation mode?
Oh, yeah.
Play from start. There
Perfect.
you
Are we there?
go. You're still in notes view.
Sorry about that.
Yep. Play from start. Play from start. Nope. You're still in presentation mode.
That's so weird. Okay. Let's see. Is that working?
There you go. That's it.
Okay.
That's it.
Sorry about that, everyone. Okay. So I think we're back, right? Okay, so we talked about the 4 ways of connectedness, and we talked about where we want to start when we think of those things. So when we're talking about connectedness, we're thinking about social interactions and how those are very diverse and complex. So a social interaction is something that's made up of a very complex web of skills, things that we might not even be aware that we're fully doing, right? When we're having a basic conversation with somebody, we are having shared and mutually understood language, joint attention, eye contact. We're sustaining a conversation. We are picking up on verbal and nonverbal social cues. We're using perspective taking. We're using empathy. Social norms and expectations. We kind of understand from our learning history of what those things are. So things that we might not even be aware that we're doing, we are doing, and they're usually at a very fast pace, right? So some key points that I kind of want to highlight as we dive in here. First off, I think it's important to highlight that autism is a spectrum. So, right, we know that no individual case of autism looks the same. Each individual has specific strengths and areas of need. And because of that, that leads into our second point, is that when, as a BCBA, as targeting goals, we want to be sure that these goals are individualized and really appropriately selected for the needs of the specific learner. And right, so really like a one size doesn't fit all approach, understanding all the complexities, all the different individualistic traits. And I think something else that comes with that, I think oftentimes as we're programming or as we're even talking about autism, right, the narrative tends to go towards the deficits. What are the things that we're not doing? Where are we lacking? Where do we want to improve those skills? But I think it's just as important to go into this third point. What are the learner's strengths? So I always ask parents, what's your kiddo already doing that they're really good at? What are things that they like, that they feel confident in, and how can we just use that to build upon? And I also think it's important to highlight, as we're teaching social skills, as we're teaching kids what is expected, what behaviors will help them access those things. We're not working to fix anything. We're not working to make them more normal or make them more acceptable. We're really saying we're asking parents, if my child had these skills, how would that help them be more successful in their environments? How would that open more doors for them to access connection? So with these 3 things in mind, I think the first place to start, and things that parents ask me often are, well, how do I know what social skills goals my child should be working on in the first place? So when I'm first starting to program social goals, it's assessments, it's interviews, it's observations, a lot of technical jargon. But essentially, a big question that we would start to ask would say, well, what are their peers doing? What are other kids their age, their neurotypical peers? What are they doing that maybe your kid is not doing? And because they're not doing those things, what are they missing out on? So that's where I like to start. And then again, going back to the strengths that they have, what things are they already really good at? Maybe they're really good at saying hi. That's great. We can reinforce that, and then maybe just teach them some more skills to have some WH questions, to initiate some conversations. So building on what they're already doing really well. What prerequisite skills are they lacking? So what things do they need to learn before they can do what we want them to do? So you have to be able to walk before you can run, right? What skills would they need to learn before they can do this? So that's something we're looking for. And then we're also looking at what are the current barriers to them accessing social opportunities or social connection right now. Is that like simply that maybe they don't have the appropriate setting to access those skills? Are they missing out on peer opportunities? What does that look like? Again, I think it's a lot of this is where you can work really closely with your team and maybe answer that question with them. If my child had this skill or these sets of skills, how would that set them up for more success in their social environments? So talking again about breaking down barriers, so I think to think about what things in our lives are, right, like where we encountered where we know what we want that long-term outcome to be. We just don't necessarily maybe know all of the steps that we need to get there to access that reinforcement. So, right, it's kind of like when you go to the gym, right, the outcome of going to the gym is maybe being fit or gaining more muscle or whatever that looks like. But the long-term outcome isn't necessarily the behavior. That's the outcome of a lot of little behaviors, right? It's getting a trainer, it's having somebody show you how to do all those exercises. So I think when we're thinking about long-term outcomes of social skills and connection, it's kind of similar to that, right? What are those smaller skills that we need to really isolate and target? And so I think the first step, what we do as behavior analysts when we're breaking down those barriers, is to really isolate those specific target behaviors and skills and teach them individually. And one way that we like to do this is thinking about what behaviors are pivotal. So when we talk about something that's pivotal, we are learning a skill in ABA and then allowing the learner to go on and apply it to ways in their natural worlds, right? We definitely don't want the learning to stop in our intervention setting. Whatever we target, we want to make sure that that's something that is going to be valuable to that learner, is going to be valuable to that family, something that they can then take into their natural world and continue to use it. And we can just kind of be the ones helping facilitate that process. So next, I think it's important to think about where to go from here, because so say, right, we've got a situation where we've broken down these skills. We've said, okay, here's the things we can work on. Here's what we can learn. Great. But as we know, kids get older. And as you get older, the social complexities change and look very different. And what kiddos' peers are doing in high school versus elementary school are very different. So I think that's an important question to ask, right? How do we kind of advance those complexities of the skills as our learners move through their lifespans? So kind of just bear with me here. I have two examples where we can kind of look at two hypothetical situations in very different areas and break down some of these skills together. So example one, we have Kyle, who is 5 years old, on the playground. Kyle's peers are running on the playground and pretending to be dinosaurs. They then sit down at the table and open their lunch boxes for snack time. Kyle's peers ask him for his fruit roll-up, and he swaps them for an Oreo. Then the kids go into the classroom for free time and start playing with blocks. 3 peers begin to try to see who can build the tallest tower. Kyle and his friends are putting blocks on the tower with each other, which eventually crash to the ground. When the bell rings, the students look up, and the teacher calls the students to clean up and come line up at the door. So probably a typical kindergarten day or preschool day. There's a lot of skills happening in this little scenario. So some of them that I pulled are joint attention. So being able to kind of share the same stimuli, share the same experience, like with building the towers. 2 people are looking at it, we're interacting. For Kyle to be successful, he needs to respond to his name, be able to imitate his peers, follow multiple step directions, engage in cooperative play, turn taking, conversation exchange, identifying emotions of others, sharing, and pretend play. So I think this is interesting to kind of look at this, right? Because one interaction, we can see there's a lot of smaller skills that are going into there that we can really pick apart and teach. So we're looking at a 5-year-old, hypothetical 5-year-old situation. Now we'll look at another example. So now we're looking at Kyle, freshman year of high school, which is something I try to block out of my memory forever. But anyway, so we'll say it's Kyle's freshman year of high school, and all of the students in homeroom are sharing about what they did over summer. Everyone is chatting. Kyle is trying to make new friends with a new person. He shares with a new person that over the summer he learned to surf. As he starts to talk about surfing, he notices that the other person looks a bit worried. They are biting their nails, they're looking around, they are fidgeting. Kyle then asks them if they're doing okay, and they state that they just moved all the way from Chicago and are trying to fit in. He invites him to sit with his friends for lunch. Okay. So from this scenario, different than kindergarten, we are looking at some skills like recalling and telling events, conversation exchange, perspective taking, identifying nonverbal social cues, identifying emotions, empathy, initiating conversation, joining conversations. So I think in both scenarios, right, we can see there's a lot of smaller skills, but obviously skills from here and skills from here are a different complexity, and those things can change across time. So I think that kind of leads us into this, where I want to talk about generalization. So I would say that generalization, if there's anything that we're doing that we want our work to be, is that the kiddos can generalize their skills across time and across environments and across peers. So when we're talking about generalization, basically, if whatever we're teaching, we want it to last. We want them to be able to use it in their environments. We want it to be meaningful, right? We don't want the kiddo to only be able to greet the BT when they come in. We want them to be able to say hi to grandma when she comes over, or to be able to like have a conversation with their friends in the classroom, or ask questions to people at the store. So everything we're teaching, we really, really only consider it mastered, and really want to make sure that if we're going to teach it, what's our plan for generalization? And how can we work to generalize those things as time goes across? Because as we saw from those two hypothetical examples, a conversation with two kindergartners is going to look very different than a conversation with maybe two high schoolers. So really looking to advance those complexities, making sure we're teaching skills along the way, and supporting families for the things that they want to work on as well. So one thing I would really, really encourage you to do is to talk to your BCBA about what goals is your child ready to target in generalization in your ABA program. Generalization can look so many different ways, as we've kind of been talking about, but one example I'll share with you is I was recently working with a client, and he has a lot of strengths. Like he's able to sustain a conversation. He is able to greet you. He's very polite. He's got a lot of interests. He's got a lot of skills, but some of those higher order social skills, right, in the sense of like identifying social cues or perspective taking, or just some things that he kind of needs some help with. So one of the things we were working on with him was to be able to identify nonverbal social cues. So when we first started working with him, one thing that his mom reported to us, and something that we kind of saw, was he really didn't understand personal space, as well as like what people's body language meant if they were feeling uncomfortable. So we worked on it at home with him in two ways. We worked on, I would be there and his therapist would be there, and we'd say, okay, if you're here and this person's starting to go like this, like what is that? What do you think that means? And so we would start to teach him, that means, this person's uncomfortable. And then we would say, okay, great. What do you think you should do if you see that person feeling this way? And then we taught him that, oh, if it means that I'm maybe too close and I need to scoot away. So we practiced that over and over again at home. His therapist was really, really great, really creative with him. We even used like Pokemon as a way to help him learn it. And we practiced it and practiced it. And he had a peer come over during session on a Friday. And then I checked in with them the next week. How did the, play date go? And his mom said that his friend was over and they were sitting on the couch together. I think they were playing Pokemon Go or something. And this client was a little too close to her. I think his hand was like on his knee or something. He didn't even realize it. And the friend was kind of scooting away. And our client looks at his therapist and goes, "Oh my gosh, I'm too close. I need to scoot away," and backed up. And I love sharing that story because I think that's true generalization happening, right? He's now using this in real life with a friend. Maybe he doesn't always need to announce it in the future, but really, I think I love how we're able to use their interventions and then help our kiddos use them in their natural environments with their peers. So to me, that's true generalization happening. And that is really what we're getting, what we're teaching, what our long-term outcomes of programming social skills is. So some other generalization opportunities, if you haven't talked to your staff or your BCBAs about, some things that I like to do are, so kind of like the scenario I just shared, play dates, like having them invite a peer over for session, at community outings, so going to a store to practice asking questions, finding information, practicing conversation skills. There's after school groups, clubs, sports, theater, really any resources. And if you're not sure what those resources are, I would encourage you to reach out to your BCBA, reach out to TACA, reach out to your community and see what those things are. So we've been talking a lot about generalization, and one thing I really want to provide is, you as parents, and caregivers and friends, you're so crucial to your child's development, and you're such a crucial part of your child's treatment team. So some things that you guys can do to help facilitate that generalization, to help really make these things stick, right? Something that I always ask parents is like, well, what's really valuable to you? Like, what do you want to see your kids doing now or in a year or in 5 years? And once we've narrowed those down and those skills down, one thing I really, really go over with parents is reinforcement. So I think consciously trying to pick out those moments of skills that kids are doing well and really remembering to point those out and say, hey, like, you did such a great job saying hi to grandma when she come over, or, oh my gosh, you were such a good sport when we played Monopoly, or you did so wonderful, asking questions when we went to the store, right? So just really remembering to take those moments captive and really reinforce that really, 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 really helps with the generalization process. I think it can happen outside of sessions. It can happen in all the environments that maybe your treatment team isn't there with you, and really helps that stick across environments. So reinforcement's huge. Using visual supports. I'll share some examples with you here, but some visuals I like to use, especially when teaching, are, maybe little prompts and subtle notes. I've used sticky notes. I've used conversation maps, like flow charts, things that can kind of help kiddos visualize where they're going and what skills we're working on. Social stories, I'll share some examples of those too. I think social stories can be a great way to kind of help kiddos see things and make some things like their little mantras. This one is huge as well. So I think especially with our younger learners, but really any level, any age, I think modeling is so crucial. And the more that you can model the correct responses and model what you want, like, kids are really picking that up. So modeling what that looks like and having them practice is huge. So I would really, really encourage you to be modeling as much as you can throughout the day, whether that's modeling language, modeling appropriate turn taking, and modeling a conversation, like as much as you can, I would really recommend. creating as many of those opportunities as you can. And then finally, behavior skills training. So this is something that we use in our field a lot when we're training staff, when we're training caregivers. It's a 4-part step. So we're explaining what the skill is, modeling what that looks like, having the person practice it, and then giving them feedback. So this is something I also like to teach parents to do, because if there's a social skill that you want your kiddo to learn, really breaking it down in this way to reflect with them, of explaining why we're working on it, showing them what it looks like, having them practice, and then providing them that feedback. And then for some visuals, as we talked about earlier, these are some that I like to use. So this first one I've used before for our learners who, when we're working on things like social boundaries. So circles of friendship, so they can put in the outside circle here people that maybe are just acquaintances. The blue circle can be people that they're friends, purple's family, or however you want to break it down, but using a visual in this way to help them kind of break down social boundaries, or what things are appropriate, which things are not appropriate. Having that visual can really be powerful for some of our learners. And then this one I've also liked to use on the right here, conversation maps. So this is just an example, but greetings, starting questions or statements, conversation, a short explanation, exiting statements. So using this while we're teaching to help facilitate prompting, to help facilitate their ability to kind of see that process as a whole. And eventually the hope would be to fade this out completely, right? But if we can use visuals to help, I think that's great. And I think these are some great ways to get started with that. We talked about we touched on social stories earlier. So here's an example of a social story if you haven't seen one before. This is one I have used before on good sport versus bad sports, sportsmanship, tolerating losing, those kinds of things. So I guarantee if you Google like social stories, you can probably find a lot. This is something that I've used before, like I said, with sportsmanship. And what we would do with this kiddo is we would read this over with him before we would go play some of his board games that he liked. And he would kind of make this his mantra, like being a respectful winner, being a good sport, practicing some of these statements he can say if he's upset. So I think social stories can be great. And then finally, just a last example. There's examples, but this is one that I've used before for down like talking bubble versus thinking bubble, when we're working on what things should you keep in your thinking bubble and what things can you say out loud. We had him write down different statements that we'd heard before, and then we would help him kind of put those in the right bubbles and talk about why they go in those bubbles. So just a couple of examples, but visuals can be a really, really awesome way to help get that learning going. Okay, and then I know we have a holiday season coming up, which I'm sure many of us are anticipating. So I wanted to kind of bring that into play here. So I would say talk to your BCBA or your behavior analysts about what those things are for you. What things are you hoping to do, and what maybe anticipatory things or things maybe you're wary about coming up? Is that, wanting to go trick-or-treating? Is that wanting to get through a Thanksgiving dinner? Is that shopping? Like whatever that looks like. Talk to your behavior analyst about what those are and how we can help you through the season and through the things that you want to do, because maybe there's some great learning opportunities going in there. And those are things that I think we can prepare for what would be best for your family. And so just a couple more methods that I like to use. So this is probably one, if you're familiar with ABA, you've heard a lot before, is priming. One thing I've worked on with parents, just an example, priming them. So in the car, like on the way to social settings or social outings, really reviewing those rules and expectations with them. So, remember when we get to the after school group, like we're going to say hi to your teacher. We're going to say hi to your friends. We're going to follow these rules, right? Kind of front loading them with that information. reinforcement systems. So I think this can be a powerful thing that you as parents and caregivers can do at home for helping generalize and helping meet some of those social goals. One thing that I just worked on with a family pretty recently, we were working on positive comments during games. And so what we did is every time this client made a positive comment and in a board game, he would get a point, and then he could trade in those points for something else at home. So just an example, talk to your BCBAs about what that could look like. But I think parents and families being able to support a reinforcement system at home can be really powerful. And then finally, practice perspective taking. So in situations that arise, ask your kiddo, like, what might this person be thinking or saying, or what would you expect them to do? Maybe things come up day to day where they have opportunities to practice that, to use that perspective taking piece of putting themselves in somebody else's shoes. So I would say just capitalize on those moments, right? Things that really use as many teaching moments as you can. And then I also wanted to talk about self-management. This is something that I really like to set up for our learners because we all have to do self-management in our lives. Self-management is learning to observe whether your own target behavior occurred or did not occur. So I've had clients say to me before, I just really want to have more people to talk to in my classroom, or I really want to be better at this. And then I'll say, okay, well, great. How can we make that happen? Like, what do we need to do? And kind of setting up for them to keep track of their own goals and practice on their own. I don't know if anyone has watched Love on the Spectrum. I love it. But they kind of just did that in that show where they were going on a date and the therapist was coaching them to prompt themselves to ask questions in the right moments. And that was something they were able to kind of look at and observe on their own and prompt themselves to do. So learning self-management skills is really important. And I would say talk to your BCBAs about how we can help set this up for you and how we can help your kiddos kind of learn to prompt themselves. And then while we're talking about self-management, I just wanted to share this as well. This is something that some of my colleagues and I recently discussed for our learners who were trying to make some friends at our social group. So questions that we asked were, do you have a best friend? What do you like about that person? What makes you feel comfortable around that person? If you don't have a close friend or a community, what are the barriers that are in the way? And what skills could you use to overcome those barriers? So I think for our kiddos who can be reflective and really can think through these things for themselves, including them in the goals and what they want to learn and what they want in their lives is so powerful. And so I think to whatever extent possible, really bringing the kiddos in and talking through these things can be really, really powerful and really connect everybody as a team. And then I wanted to bring this up as well, because this is a question I feel like I've gotten often from some parents. What if my child seems to prefer to be on their own? I would say that that's totally okay. We don't want to have to force them to have any social interactions they don't want to have. But rather, I think we want to just try to be able to open up the door to possibilities, right? Meeting the kiddo, meeting the family where they're at and saying, hey, like, that's totally fine. But what opportunities could we maybe open up for you? What things maybe are you missing that you maybe don't know you're missing, right? And I would also say that thinking about the barriers of what is it that's causing some preference to be by themselves? Is it maybe that the social opportunities that they have aren't very reinforcing to them? Is it that they aren't connecting with any people in that group? And one thing that I've told parents before, or that we've set up in treatment before, is trying to find those opportunities where it's something that the kiddo really enjoys doing. It's something that they really like. That way they can start pairing those things with other kids that are there. So starting there, I think, was something that they really, really like. Trying to have those opportunities with a shared interest or things that are really important to them, I think, can be a good way to start. And then access and resources in general. So as we've said a couple times in here, definitely talk to your BCBA about resources if you're not sure what things are in your community. One thing I know is great as well is reach out to Regional Center if you haven't. Reach out to nonprofits and see what organizations are around you. And then I'll include this information as well. But ABA Visualized, I think, is also a really, really awesome guide and it's written as a curriculum for parents. And so it's definitely something that I would really recommend checking out. I think it gives some really good examples and tips. All right. So to kind of summarize what we've been talking about here, if there are 3 main take-home points from what you got today, the first one is connection, right? So going back to what we first started talking about, accessing connection being feeling like you're part of something greater, belonging to a group, feeling welcomed, feeling understood. We, as ABA practitioners, want to teach those skills that will allow greater access to that connection. With these skills, how can my child then gain access to that connection? The second key point, developing trust and open communication with your clinical team. So I can't stress this enough. I think you as parents and caregivers are such crucial parts to your child's whole treatment plan. And so I think developing that open line of trust and communication and being able to comfortable to say to your team, hey, like these goals are great, but here's something we're not working on, and here's something I really want to be working on, or I don't really understand why we're working on this goal. Can you help me understand? Having that line of trust and communication, I think, really, really solidifies everyone's on the same page. We're focusing on what's important and valuable to you as a family, as an individual, as a culture. So I can't stress that enough. And then my last point here, I want to leave you with this. At the very end of the day, my hope would be that your child would be able to show up as their authentic self, be who they are, yet have some more tools in their toolbox to allow them to have those meaningful connections in their lives. And that is all I have for you guys. So thank you so much. Okay, I think we're gonna do some questions here. Let me just pull my screen. All right. Okay, cool. We got some awesome questions. One person said, are 15-year-olds too old for ABA? No, they are not. I think there could be a lot of areas we could start. I think it would depend on what services they've gotten before, what we want to work on, where we can start. So I would encourage you to still reach out, and BCBA can really go through that with you and look through that. But no, 15 is not too old for ABA. Okay, this one's a good question. Someone said, how do we help social skills with a nonverbal child? That's a great question, because so much of what we talk, language, right? Communication through mutually understood language. A big thing I would say to really focus on is joint attention. So we talked a little bit about joint attention, but joint attention is being able to share the same experience. So looking at the same thing, playing with the same thing, working on your child, maybe if they can't talk, being able to grab your attention and point and say, look, to start to have some shared experiences. I think is a great place to start for nonverbal while we're still working on language. And then some simple back and forth interactions. Maybe that's passing a ball back and forth, which is still using that joint attention, but just adding some more skills in there. So that's, I think, a great place to start. Okay, what would you advise a parent who cannot find the right fit for her son? Most BCBAs have way too many cases and aren't being hands-on. I love ABA and it's helped us in the past, but it's difficult to find a clinical team. Yeah, that can be hard. So I would say, you know, talking to your clinical directors at your agencies too, talking about what are those needs that your family has? Where are those needs being met and where are those needs not being met? That way we can really break down for you, what can we do better on? Or what are some resources that we can offer for you guys? Okay. Somebody said, can they be used to work on feelings of self-worth and self-confidence? That's a really cool question. So ABA is so scientific, right? It's all about observable behaviors. So I think my answer is partially yes, partially no. I think when it comes to self-worth and self-confidence, that is something where we can talk about what that means. We can talk about what are the barriers to, like, what if they had more self-worth and self-confidence, what behaviors would they be engaging in more, right? So if they wanted to, be able to go like up a conversation with a stranger, but they're feeling like they don't have that self-worth or that self-confidence, well, how can we kind of get them there? How can we help them practice what those behaviors look like? And I think that's something we can talk to them about and we can talk to parents about and create a protocol for. But I think when it terms of talking, there is a limit, I think, as far as we can go as behavior analysts. But that is something that I always say, hey, like if there's an MFT or somebody who can really help supplement in areas that we're not really trained to supplement in, I definitely encourage that as well. Okay, let's see. My daughter is 7 years old and she has been biting her hands excessively for the past year. How can implement in her ABA plan? So that question, I would say I probably don't have the means to give you specific clinical advice. Unfortunately, since I haven't seen that client or that specific situation, but please reach out to your behavior analyst. That way they can really give you that specific clinical feedback. Ooh, okay. This says, can you give examples for teens how to use ABA prior to a social situation to support the situation with peers? So I think you're asking, like, how can we use ABA ahead of time, right? And then prime them for going into situations with peers. So for that, we do a lot of like rehearsing at home. So maybe we kind of set up a similar situation to what they're going to be encountering. So I've done this before with kids who have started. They're going to start school, new school, or high school. Scary things, and we kind of practice like, hey, what can you say? Like, let's pretend you're walking into class. Like, what can you say if this happens? What can you say if you try to get this person's attention and they don't listen? Or maybe we kind of role play that with them a little bit and kind of give them some practice. And then I've also done with kids too, where I've had them reflect on their interactions and kind of talk through like, here's what happened, but here's what I want to do next time. Let's see. Can ABA help with feelings of fear of being in trouble? That's interesting. I think I would be curious to break that down a little bit more and kind of talk about the learning history of what in trouble means and what that history is. Again, I think that's probably pretty case specific, but with ABA, we are really focusing on that positive reinforcement, I would say, versus being in trouble. All right. Well, thank you guys again so much. I enjoyed our time, and I hope you learned something, and I hope you have a great rest of your day and your conference.